Electric SUVs. You either love them or you absolutely loathe them. Either way, they're the hottest new segment in the automotive industry right now. In Q1 2023, the Tesla Model Y was the best-selling car in the world. Not the best-selling luxury car, not the best-selling electric car, the best-selling car, period. So it is with much excitement and much anticipation that Rivian launches its second vehicle and first SUV, the R1S. In case you're unfamiliar, Rivian is an Irvine, California-based EV startup that launched its first vehicle, the R1T pickup truck, in 2021. The R1S is based on the same platform as the R1T, and Rivian has kept everything from the B-pillar forward exactly identical between SUV and truck. So that means, just like the R1T, the R1S has an automatic opening frunk, a rotating charge port lid, and an elegant, if relatively familiar dash with a 15.6-inch infotainment system and a 12.3-inch instrument cluster. The biggest changes then come around back where Rivian has ditched the bed for a third row of seats and an enclosed cargo area, as well as shortening the wheelbase by 15 inches and the overall length by 17 inches. This helps make the Rivian R1S more maneuverable around town and better off-road. Like a Range Rover or Rolls-Royce Cullinan, the Rivian R1S features a split tailgate, yet at $95,000, they weren't able to give it a power bottom. And if you try to close the top while the bottom is down, the car whimpers. Now, one thing to note on this particular R1S is this yellow line and the yellow brake calipers that this vehicle have that signify this vehicle's quad motor status, which means that it has 835 horsepower, 908 pound-feet of torque, and can hit 60 in just 3 seconds. This R1S is also equipped with the long-range battery pack, which is the only one they're making right now, which has 135 kilowatt hours and is good for about 303 miles of range on these sport tires. I think the R1S looks like what Land Rover should have done when they redesigned the Discovery, or even the Defender. It's an incredibly handsome vehicle, available in some really cool colors, and I especially like the rims on this one. Sitting in the back, you don't notice the shortened wheelbase because Rivian has given the R1S the same rear seat legroom as the R1T, but I am really disappointed with these seats. They're pretty uncomfortable and have like no lumbar support. Luckily, the uncomfortable second row seats can be pushed out of the way with the push of a button, and you can climb into the third row, which has a nice feature that turns on the air conditioning automatically when it senses someone sitting back here, which is super helpful because it can be hot in here with this glass roof. And the glass roof also does mean that I, at 6'2", do have enough headroom, which is impressive. And when I bring these seats back, I have enough legroom when they are in their most forward position, but push back anymore and it would get pretty cramped pretty fast. But it's definitely large enough for kids back here, and the seats are about the same in terms of comfort as the second row. All right, driving the Rivian R1S. Now, the first thing you notice, if you have the guts to, is how fast this car is. You put your foot down and it is a rocket ship. This quad motor Rivian R1S is so fast, and you've got to be careful because this thing really does shoot off the line. Now, it has 6 different drive modes. I've mainly been using all-purpose, which is like the normal mode, also sport mode and conserve mode. The next thing you notice is the discomfort, which is slightly disconcerting. You know, this vehicle is styled so similarly to a Land Rover. It has very Land Rover vibes, like expensive, off-roady, that sort of feel. Yet these seats are actually not very comfortable. More comfortable than the back seats, but the front seats still are not great. Very stiff. I'm not a huge guy, and I think if you were larger than me, it would be even less comfortable. And the ride is not as great as the ride of the F-150 Lightning that I drove last week. That vehicle floated down the road, super composed. This is definitely a little stiffer, and I was initially disappointed. I thought this was going to be a luxury electric SUV, kind of a Range Rover replacement, and it's definitely not as comfortable as that vehicle. But you put this car in sport mode and chuck it around a corner, and then it really comes alive. This car handles impressively well. It is so planted in sport mode when the air suspension is in its lowest setting and you are pushing it to the limits. The steering is also so fast and so precise. It just goes wherever you point it, and for such a large SUV, I cannot believe it can carry so much speed throughout the corners. I'm guessing it's the weight of that 135 kilowatt hour battery pack that really pulls this thing to the ground, but it is impressively planted, this R1S. And the R1S gets even more impressive to drive when you put the suspension in the stiff mode. When you are in sport mode, it truly becomes a sports car. It feels so tight and compact, way smaller than how large the footprint actually is. And then once you get to chucking it around corners, you can have such a hoot in this car. You would not expect that out of a 3-row SUV, especially a 3-row SUV that weighs as much as this Rivian R1S does. Now, as I mentioned, it has a 135 kilowatt hour battery pack, and Rivian rates the range at about 303 miles with the sport tires. It's a little less if you get the off-road tires. And I've been seeing about 270 miles on a full charge. It's just not quite as efficient as the Ford F-150 Lightning that I drove last week, which has a smaller battery pack, 131 kilowatt hours, yet that thing has a range of 320 miles. I took the Ford F-150 Lightning on a 120 mile road trip and arrived with over 200 miles left. This thing is showing 270 miles at a full charge, and I've been seeing about that in real world driving. Okay, but let's get out of sport mode. Let's go back to all-purpose mode. The suspension goes back to soft mode. I have the brake regen on high, like I like it, and the air suspension is raising to low mode from lowest mode. And you can easily drive this car around town. It really doesn't feel like that large of a vehicle. The shortened wheelbase gives it a 4-foot shorter turning radius. I haven't really had any problem with this vehicle's size. It was definitely noticeably smaller than the F-150 Lightning I was driving last week. And it can be used as an urban car. But you do feel all the undulations, all the imperfections in the road, and the ride is kind of harsh. You can't turn it off. While that's great in sport mode, it can't be turned off. Even in soft mode, it's still a pretty stiff ride. And while I personally don't mind that, and I think a lot of car enthusiasts don't mind a stiffer ride, I think Rivian kind of missed the mark on their suspension for the R1S. Large SUVs, most customers of large SUVs, I think, want very comfortable, floaty vehicles that you can't really feel the road. You're supposed to be like wafting down, like this Range Rover that I'm coming up on. You're just supposed to be comfortable in them. You're supposed to be isolated, removed from the road. The Rivian R1S doesn't fully deliver that. It is very quiet in here. You don't have an engine. There's great noise cancellation from the outside world. So on that front, it's good, but you do really feel the road. Driving down rough surfaces, you feel everything. It's just a little disappointing. And while the materials on the inside of the R1S are very nice, I like this steering wheel. You have open pore wood trim on the dash and on the steering wheel, which I think is pretty cool. The screens are super fast. They don't have CarPlay, which is another big fault of this vehicle. I really do think the Rivian R1S and the R1T should have CarPlay. And while the materials are nice, these seats just aren't very comfortable, and that's another bummer. If this car had more comfortable seats and a more comfortable suspension, it would be a Range Rover killer, no doubt. But this is only Rivian's second vehicle. For being a second vehicle, this is insanely impressive. The build quality, everything feels really tight and solid around me. The technology is really impressive, and I'm overall blown away by this car. There's just a few letdowns that keep it from being top notch. But I'm really excited to see where Rivian can go, how they can further engineer this platform, this car, and their future cars to be even better. So that's the Rivian R1S. It's insanely fast, strikingly handsome, yet not quite as comfortable as I would have hoped. Yet at $95,000, it kind of seems like a bargain in a world of insanely expensive electric luxury SUVs. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.